Very few people would be aware of Ashtavakra.
Ashtavakra Gita is like a hammer to the head. There is no story, there are no characters, there is nothing. The Ashtavakra tells Janaka, you want to be free? Give up everything and be free. ना हम पूरी तरह Western बन सके, ना हम Indian रहे. We are neither there nor here. You see, so we have built a toxic relationship in our country.
What Ashtavakra talks about life, how we can explain it better to the youth.
Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. The Brahman is the truth and the world is an illusion.
How we can create this interest in the youth.
Make meditation mandatory. Number 2, bring back Sanskrit as mandatory for all schools. Look at this stupid Coldplay concert. Maniacs people have spent money on that. If you erase your own culture entirely, the same jokers who stand up in universities like NLS or whatever and abuse Sadhguru will pay money and go to a Coldplay concert. The book, I think, in popular culture that best explains it is Harry Potter, where J.K. Rowling explains why he didn't die because of love of his mother. So whether your mother is alive or dead, the physical form, the love of your mother protects you.
So let's talk about your sacred sword where you talk about Guru Gobind Singh.
चिड़ियों से मैं बाज लड़ाऊं, गिदरों को मैं शेर बनाऊं, 1.25 लाख से एक लड़ाऊं, तब गोविंद सिंह नाम कह. Then you can call me Singh. What is Singh? It's like a lion.
So, welcome, Hindol.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here today.
See, Lipika, nobody could have brought me to Noida Sector 62 apart from you. You see, this is what old friendship is.
I know, I agree, and it's taken us a lot of persuasion for the last 1 month, over a month.
No, I'm sorry I fell ill. It's always a joy to meet you, and congratulations on all the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Congratulations in having built a genuinely entrepreneurial product in a fairly moribund publishing industry in India. So, all my congratulations to you.
Thank you so much. You're a true friend, and you started this podcast on such a lovely note. But let me begin this conversation with your most recent book, which is with Vivek.
Yeah.
Your book on Ashtavakra Gita. Frankly, I think in India today, very few people would be aware of Ashtavakra. Ashtavakra, that means 8 Vikrityon wala. So the sage had 8
deformations.
deformations.
Or there were 8, flaws that had to be overcome.
Okay.
So there are 2 layers of this, right? One is that usually people depict it as a sage who had 8 deformities, so to speak.
Right.
But it could also be deformities of the mind, of the soul.
Of course.
So there are 8 layers of human failings to be overcome, so to speak. He who has overcome all 8 layers is Ashtavakra.
And Ashtavakra Gita does not really talk about Ashtavakra at all. It doesn't give you an insight into his personality, so to say, but it's a conversation, it's a Q&A between Janak and him.
Yes.
So while we know that Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is the other Gita, which is the more popular Gita people know of, is set in the battlefield, and it's again a Q&A form between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. What is the difference between these two in terms of setup as well? Where is this Ashtavakra Gita set? And secondly, in terms of the Q&A that happens between Janak and Ashtavakra, sage Ashtavakra, and the kind of Q&A that happens between Arjuna and Sri Krishna.
So, the Ashtavakra Gita is unique in many ways. One of the ways it's unique is that it gives us no context. The Bhagavad Gita has a context. Here are these two sides of a family. They have a history, there is legacy, they don't like each other, then there is this game, and then this massive war unfolds, and then within that war, there is this great chariot. On top of the chariot is the greatest archer of all time, and his steerer, so to speak, of the chariot is God himself in human form. And God speaks to Arjuna, Krishna speaks to Arjuna about various things, which is the Bhagavad Gita, right? Whereas the Ashtavakra Gita doesn't tell us anything about Ashtavakra, King Janaka, and so on and so forth. We make assumptions that this Janaka might be somebody else mentioned in some other scripture and so on and so forth. But the Ashtavakra Gita doesn't tell us anything. It gets straight to the point. There is the Rishi Ashtavakra and there is Raja Janak, and they are having a conversation. And that conversation is about only one thing. What is the truth? How can one discover the truth? That's it. There is no story, there are no characters, there is nothing. There is no context at all. That's why they say Ashtavakra Gita is like a hammer to the head. It's like the truth cutting through everything else and going straight to the point. Which is why in my book also I write that, it is said that when all other scriptures fall silent, Ashtavakra begins to speak. In the sense that when everything that could be said about philosophy and religion, everything has been said, when everything is over and everybody's fallen silent, then Ashtavakra, the ultimate truth, begins to speak. Right? Because the Ashtavakra is really concerned with that one very thing. What is the ultimate nature of truth? And in order to discover that truth, what must you do? Which will give you Satchitananda. It will give you infinite bliss. It will give you happiness. It will, tear you away from the material bondage of the world.
Since you brought this up, and since I am also a student of Bhagavad Gita,
sure,
there were a few similarities that I did find there.
Yes.
And one of them being that,
because after all, these are both texts of Advaita Vedanta.
Of course. So there are chapters where even Sri Krishna talks about life and death and understanding and truth.
Yeah.
In your book Ashtavakra Gita and in the original text, so to say, when you talk about this is where you are seeking the ultimate truth for Satchidananda. What is the entire process laid out by Ashtavakra through this conversation with Janaka and the 8 layers that you were just mentioning? If you could just probably elaborate on that.
So here's the other thing. Even there is no methodology. See, in the Bhagavad Gita, basically Krishna tells Arjuna that, you forsake all other paths and surrender to me.
Yeah.
Right? And if you surrender to me, I will take care of you. Right? In Ashtavakra Gita, Ashtavakra tells Janaka, you want to be free? Give up everything and be free. Now this, as I say in the book also, this for most people is much more easier said than done.
I was about to ask
it's very difficult for us to say, okay, now I want to be free. All right, from next moment onwards, I've given up all my attachments of the world and I'm free. And yet, that is what Ashtavakra is doing. That's why it's a hammer to the head. Ashtavakra is saying, I'm not going to give you all this, first meditate, then do puja, then do... You forget all that.
Paddhati, so to say.
No. You wish to learn the truth and find the truth. The truth is this. And the only way to find it, from this moment onwards, you give up all attachments. And realize that this is the truth and embrace it. End of story. And that's why the Ashtavakra Gita in verse after verse says that, you will notice that there are a lot of questions that the Ashtavakra Gita asks. What is this? What is family? What is life? What is God? Beyond all of these things, there is absolute liberation. And that liberation is to be found by realizing that all of this is not real. One of the great analogies of the Ashtavakra Gita is this rope and snake comparison, right? That which you see as a snake in the darkness of your mind, because your mind is so clouded with material attachment and therefore darkness. It is not a snake. It is merely a rope. It is your own material attachments that have clouded your vision, and your fears and your anxieties and your inability to comprehend life that makes you see this as snake. But it's actually rope. Now, when we launched the book with the Honorable Finance Minister, who very kindly launched the book a few weeks ago with Dr. Vivek Devroy and me, Dinesh Trivedi, the former Trinamool politician, was there, former railway minister. And, because he is also from Bengal, he took me aside and said, "Oh, I really like the book and well done." And he said, funnily enough, had Ashtavakra lived in Delhi, he would have realized that yes, it is true that many things that you think are snake turn out to be rope, but many things that you turn out to be rope actually turns out to be snake also.
Right.
So, which was very funny. But I wanted to sort of, lighten the sort of heaviness of the philosophy to sort of give you this aside. But really, genuinely, if you look at it, at the end of the Ashtavakra Gita also, what does Ashtavakra say? That why are we even saying all of these things? What is there that we are trying to find? What is the meaning of any of this? Because after all of this is also part of this world of illusion that we have built. Because the truth exists in that moment of silence. Right? And in my book, I was wondering whether to write this book in this manner or not, because I think, audiences still need to sort of, come to a particular point.
In order to understand it.
Yeah, and also, you see, in my book, I talk about many things. I talk about, interactions with everyday life, what it means, in our present. And I talk about, a grave illness of my father and how reading the Ashtavakra Gita helped me and so on and so forth. And I also connect to many other texts, right? Zen texts and so on, the work of Jiddu Krishnamurti, of course, Vivekananda and all of that, right? Now, at the end of the book, and I want to give you this, there is this moment, and I thought about this as I was, finishing the book, and Ashtavakra was saying that, none of this is worth anything. Even these queries are meaningless, What is this happiness, joy, what is even a query, and so on and so on. If you see Jiddu Krishnamurti's last public lecture, it's fascinating. He's sitting on some raised platform and there are all these people sitting in front of him. I think it's probably in Bombay or somewhere. And there's a nice breeze and so on and so forth. And Jiddu Krishnamurti finishes saying whatever he was saying. And he said, "This is the last, this is my last lecture." And then he tells the audience, "So should we just sit here for a moment in silence?" Right? But even as he is saying it, you can see people are beginning to rise up, people are beginning to turn, people are beginning to pick up papers, somebody is walking away. And Jiddu Krishnamurti is telling them, no, just sit still, be silent. And then he raises his head towards the heavens, and the breeze, sort of makes his hair flow. And you realize in the moment that, even Jiddu Krishnamurti perhaps realizes that these people who have gathered to listen to him, God knows what all they're understanding or not understanding, but fundamentally they do not have the ability to do that one thing that human beings cannot, which is sit still for a moment.
But don't you think that is exactly where the problem lies when you are talking about some of the profound philosophies that especially Bharat has come out with, and which are, to our delight that they are being rewritten, retold, But don't you think that is a key problem? And when you are writing something of this nature, and as you yourself share that you have to reach a certain level of understanding in order to absorb what is being told in the Ashtavakra Gita. How do you see this problem being overcome over time? Because while you are in the first place, you and Vivekda did this great service to us by translating it from the original text and producing it with your views and your opinions there in the book. But
how does a common person जो रोज अपनी सुबह की 2 रोटी और उसके लिए जूझ रहा है, how do you find him, observing something as profound?
So I have a very simple solution to that. Right? Look, the truth is, very few people. Swami Vivekananda was told by Sri Ramakrishna to read the Ashtavakra. Right? Ramana Maharishi spoke about the Ashtavakra Gita. Famously, Osho has a series of lectures on the Ashtavakra Gita.
True.
Right? Now, I would be foolish to suggest that everybody or even a few people necessarily would be able to apply the lessons of the Ashtavakra Gita in their life. I mean, truly, how many of us can do that? But I'll give you a very simple solution, which I think is very important. You see, what has happened in India is, and we are going through a very strange phase. For about large part of our post-independence history, we wanted so desperately to emulate the West that we tried very hard to cut away all umbilical cords.
Correct.
I remember when I wrote Being Hindu, the mother of a dear friend of mine told me that it's quite interesting that you're beginning to write books like this, because in our generation we wanted to take our children far away from all this. They were to become successful, go abroad, become international, become global, all of that, right? And that what happened because of that is we broke every umbilical cord to our culture. And the result of that is, ना हम पूरी तरह वेस्टर्न बन सके, ना हम इंडियन रहे, ना हम पाश्चात्य को पूरी तरह से embrace कर पाए, ना हम भारतीय रहे. We have become Trishankus, which is one of the things I mentioned in the book. We are Trishankus. We are neither there nor here. And the interesting thing is, I'll give you an example of what happens. If you think about your own parents, Lipika, most likely, and my parents and everybody else's parents, most likely whatever else they were doing, there was some period of their week or day where they would have to do something spiritual. अगरबत्ती जला दिया, एक थोड़ा सा गाना चला दिया, थोड़ा मंत्र पढ़ लिए. When you step out of the house, there's a neighborhood temple. While going to office, you ring the bell, you do a pranam, you do a namaskar. You spend a few minutes with God and then you go.
Right.
Or while coming back.
Right.
It is only in our generation that even that has been eliminated. You go to most people's homes today, there is no place. I mean, Indians' homes would always have some kind of an altar.
True.
Bada ho, chota ho, lavish ho, small ho, whatever it is, there would be some altar. It is only in our generation that people think it is much more important to build a bar, which is the obsession I see with my foolish friends. They are far more interested कि मैं नया घर खरीदूंगा, उसमें bar कहाँ रहेगा? Then actually have even the smallest altar. What happens because of this? What happens is exactly what we are seeing all around us. Younger people, look at this stupid Coldplay concert that's happening. And how like maniacs people have spent money on that. God knows how many crores have been spent on that. Now, I have nothing against Coldplay. Nor do I have anything against anybody listening to music from anywhere in the world. My point is, if you erase your own culture entirely, the same jokers, like who stand up in universities like NLS or whatever and abuse Sadhguru will pay money and go to a Coldplay concert. You see, so we have built a toxic relationship in our country. Anybody who talks about cultural depth, we don't like. We will find every opportunity to attack that person. We will find every opportunity to abuse that person. And yet we are not only even becoming fully West, because actually when we are trying desperately to become fully West, the West doesn't want us.
Accept us. True.
I mean, welcome to the reality. The West doesn't want you. You may be, jumping like a monkey in front of your white masters. They don't want you, boss. They want you in a particular format, but very few can fit that format. Right? So therefore, Indians are, I think, and this also all evidence shows this, that we have one of the highest mental health problems, growth of mental health problems. And this will happen. We decided at some point that, no, communities are not good. We are going to be all these isolated nuclear families. Okay. दादा दादी, मामा मामी, चाचा चाची, सबसे आपने काट दिया रिलेशन. क्यों? आपको न्यूक्लियर फैमिली बनना है, बॉम्बे जाके 28th फ्लोर में रहना है, वहां से सी व्यू चाहिए. सो आपका बार एक तरफ होगा और सी व्यू एक तरफ होगा. You thought you're going to be happy. Then you have children. Then you realize, my money is now not being able to buy me the kind of help that I need to really bring up my children. So then what happens to children? Children will go to these very expensive schools where you will read in the newspapers that drugs are rife in these schools. Look at the toxicity of our culture, right? Look at all. I mean, literally, even when I grew up, to be honest, Lipika in Calcutta, when I grew up, I mean, I remember my mother falling ill and having to go to the hospital. Even today, my mother says, she didn't even think who's going to take care of me. Because there were enough people in that society who got hold of me, fed me, put me to bed, sent me to school the next day. 1 month or 1 week later, my mother came back knowing that her son is completely taken care of. There was a sense of community.
True.
We have destroyed all of this. And all of this is connected to spirituality because it gives you a sense of community, a sense of thera or silence, a little bit of spirituality. Gives you what we in English call centeredness. You know that there is a center and you keep coming back to that still center. Most people today don't even have that still center. I know people, friends of mine in television and other, they cannot sit still, Lipika, for 2 minutes. If you tell them, okay, just sit still, read a book, whatever, they can't. It's a mental disease. And sadly enough, in India, we have all the technologies, if I were to use that word, spiritually to tackle all of these things. But the moment anybody says that this is the solution, they will say, like there is this fool who says every day on Twitter, which is now called X, that supposedly Ayurveda is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I've read that.
Nobody is saying that tomorrow if your leg has to be amputated, you put some Ayurvedic medicine, your leg will regrow. No one says that. But Ayurveda has a very important place to strengthen your body from within. And all of this is interconnected. I'm saying that you see, whether it's family, whether it's community, whether it's internal, better food and better medicine that will heal you from within rather than just give you a temporary respite. All of this is connected to a holistic culture. If you tear away all of these things and say, okay, one day I will read a book on Ashtavakra Gita, one day I will read of course it will not mean anything. It has to be integrated to your life. Why are you interested in this book? You said, I am myself a student of the Bhagavad Gita. Because you practice a certain lifestyle. That doesn't mean you're going and living in the forest, right? I mean, you're also living in a big city with all the tumult, with children and family. But there is some structure. We are actively working to destroy that culture, to destroy that structure. And this will come to no good. This cannot come to any good. Already we are suffering because of this. This cannot come to any good. It's like the city of Delhi where I live and you live, where everybody wants to buy an SUV, but then come winter they will complain about air pollution. Everybody wants incessant construction, but they will complain about air pollution. And I'm not saying farm burning is not the main problem, but I'm saying the problem is multifaceted.
Of course.
We are not even being able to do what we should be doing. So this is a problem. I mean,
But that's again a problem of consciousness.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Think about it. We say, our cities are becoming warmer and warmer. What kind of buildings are we building? जो अमेरिका में देखा है. So let's build a building like Manhattan, and then we'll put glass facade in a city where temperatures hit 49 degrees. This is madness. Look at Gurgaon. You build all these massive towers and say 10 crores, 15 crores, 100 crores. One little bit of rain and all the BMWs are floating in the rainwater, in the sewage water. So we have created a very dystopian hell for ourselves. Like I said, we are not even properly Western. If we had become properly Western, then we would have said first in Gurgaon, let's build sewage. Let's keep 50% of the land for greenery. You want to be West, you be like them, na?
Right.
You be like the way they construct in England, the way they construct in Australia or Germany or Scandinavia. But you were not that. There though you are, as they say in Twitter, Dhando Maxer. So you want to be the worst of that. You want to be Dhando Maxer there. But you also want to be, Western by, by the liquor bottles that you own. This is toxicity. This will do us no good. And it is already not doing us any good. I am appalled to hear that in schools in Delhi and Mumbai, cocaine is rife.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big problem. Addiction is a big problem.
It is shocking. Now, kids in college hiding from parents and having 2 puffs of a cigarette is a part of growing up. But if you tell me schools and colleges, cocaine is available like Coca-Cola bottles, that's a problem.
Of course.
What is going on those kids' heads? And then you see the violence in society. Same people are coming and committing violence against women, violence against children, violence in their families. We have one of the highest rates of suicide.
Right.
So think about, it's so sad in our country. Think about the fact that we have one of the oldest ancient, ideas, treasures, so to speak, of leading a good life. See, even if you're not spiritual or anything, this will make you lead a centered good life. Instead of looking towards that and valuing that, we have taken the worst of India, the worst of the West. We're not even taking the good things of the West. If you're taking the good things of the West, why do we have air pollution?
Correct.
They are working very hard to reduce air pollution. How come we have it? So it's the worst of the West and the worst of our culture put together in a toxic mixture. And the work that I do, or Dr. Vivek Devra, of course, who's a guru to all of us, does, and many others, my friend Sanjeev Sanyal and many others do, is to try and nudge people to say that, look, and which is why, people like you are our allies and invaluable in the journey, because together, what are we trying to do? We are trying to tell people that, look, you are not happy doing what you're doing. There is a path where you can be happy. It's just that you're not choosing that path.
Hindol, you got, if I may use the word, initiated very early on in your life.
Yeah.
And that's
At
an
the age
age.
of 10.
Yeah. And I think you started writing this in your late 20s, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
That's a stage.
Mid-20s actually.
Yeah, and that's a time and time period in everybody's life where you're still confused. A lot of us were heavily communist around that
Because none of you lived under communist rule. I had the misfortune of living under communist rule.
No, but then there are, many people from your state who are living under,
That's true.
and still they do not like the kind of change that is. But what I was coming to was, one is the social setup. How is it that we can create this interest in the youth for towards their own culture and the culture that actually existed for centuries, and where we were so integrated with nature, we were so integrated with our own consciousness. How do you see this happening? Especially because why I ask this is because you also write on politics. And for earlier, it was the fact that probably, the politics of the country did not allow us to have a situation where we could take pride in our culture. But for the last decade, we have a political party which is, I think, largely trying to do something like that.
Quite right.
But still, we see the problems only growing. There could be the education system to blame, it could be the past 70 years to blame, it could be the past hundreds of years of invasions to blame. But what do you see, where exactly will this change start happening, where the young, because we are like the biggest democracy with the largest percentage of youth in any country for that matter. So how do you see that, how and where do you see that change happening?
I'll give you one or two simple solutions in my humble opinion, which we can fix very easily. Make meditation mandatory like civics once used to be in school curriculums. Like we used to have designated PT class or PE class, physical training or physical education classes. Make meditation classes mandatory across the board for children. It is that 1/2 hour, 1 hour that they will have to sit down and focus on something. Number one. Number two, bring back Sanskrit as mandatory for all schools. At the very least, they will have some knowledge, something will go in from a very young age. Right? And the third is, as parents, please keep, even if it's half an hour in a week, to some kind of access to some spirituality, whatever you want, whatever appeals to you. It could be bhajan, it could be kirtan, it could be just standing in front of an altar and lighting a diya, whatever works for you. Introduce your children and yourself to that moment of peace and quiet. You don't want any deity, whatever you believe in, sort of the sort of nirgun sort of, form of God, no problem. Sit quietly, listen to something devotional, and spend half an hour in prayer in whatever format you want to pray. This itself, and that's why Sanskrit education is so powerful. It gives you access to a whole ancient universe of eternal knowledge. One of the big problems is that most Indians don't know Sanskrit.
Which has been the biggest hindrance.
It's a huge hindrance. Which means we cannot even read any of our ancient knowledge ourselves.
True.
We have to go to Max Muller to read
it.
Think about it, Lipika. I mean, how idiotic our system is. Is it ever possible that the West would go to an Indian translator to read books written in Greek and Latin?
Correct.
See, and I want to, because you mentioned politics, I want to point out how all of this connects, right? Think about it. Even today, we are saying, oh, this white person has written this book about India, that's why it is correct. Have you ever, in all your years of work, ever seen in America, in England, in Europe, even in Australia, any book that they are discussing in their public square about their society written by an Indian?
True.
Whereas we are always, oh, this person has, and sometimes, I mean, things have changed a little bit, but sometimes it should be some obscure professor in some obscure university. In fact, his work would not even be toilet paper without the fact that Indians drummed up about it. Right? It's ridiculous. I mean, I remember when I was in, college and coming out of college and so on and so forth, people began to this entire dance about Wendy Doniger. Like, why do we care about what Wendy Doniger says about our culture? That is ridiculous. You're basically saying you know so little about your own culture that you have to fight on what Wendy Doniger said about your culture.
Right.
That is the most ridiculous, asinine, stupid thing ever. You should quote your own understanding of your own culture. You should quote Indian scholars of their understanding. No, but you're quoting Wendy Doniger. Makes no sense. Like, and then we're saying one bunch of idiots are saying no, she's so wrong. Another bunch of idiots are saying no, she's so right. The whole debate is only asinine. And look at how it all connects even to politics. Even today, I was just talking to the Norwegian diplomat Erik Solheim. And he was saying to me, imagine how absurd the whole thing is. Canada is commenting on India's farmers' protest. Do you think, and he was saying, do you think if today India commented on truckers' protest in Canada, they would tolerate it? Do you think if India commented on France's Yellow Vest protest, anybody, forget France, the whole EU would rise up against this?
True.
We have people commenting on somebody gets a jail term, diplomats in India from different missions write letters saying, oh, we are so sorry. What what does it have to do with you?
Correct.
You don't know the context, you haven't seen the evidence, you have no idea.
But that's the 2.5 fronts that we are fighting. Half front that
It
we are
is
fighting
ridiculous.
internally.
So imagine how, and we tolerate it also. There are jokers who put this up and saying, amazing, see, this person said it. How ridiculous. Listen, Mr. Ambassador Solheim was also only telling me, the EU passed some resolution on Manipur. He was saying, most of these legislators cannot point out Manipur on a map.
True.
And that comes to India. See, one thing is they are doing it, we are ignoring it, no one cares. Which is the China approach. Boss, you say whatever you feel like, we don't care. But in India, we start drumming the beats about them. Oh, EU MPs have said about Manipur. Why do I care what EU MPs are saying about Manipur? What do they have to do with Manipur? So we have such a slave mentality, and that slave mentality, and you see how it's all connected. We look at them for our culture. Naturally, we look at them for our politics also.
Of course.
So it's a vicious. I'm saying our society is trapped in this vicious quagmire. And we have to break it. And it is true that over the last 10 years, a lot of things have changed, and more things are changing. In fact, the work that all of us do, you do, I do, many of us do, perhaps wouldn't even exist, had it not been for a complete change, a mood of change in the country.
Of course.
And indeed, lots of things are changing, but I'm pointing out how much things are still toxic. So we have to break it, and I fear that unless we break it in our generation, our children will also go through this nonsense.
True.
Looking at the West, some ridiculous rubbish.
Let's come back to Ashtavakra.
Yes, please, sure.
So, again, there were a few important points while reading the book I picked, and I wanted you to talk about it.
Yes.
In order, maybe in a simpler form to
Yeah.
make it more understandable for the audience, because the kind of audience who tune into our channel is between the age of 25 to 40, which is the age that we want to target.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about life, when we talk about death, when we talk about detachment, something as simple as you said, why don't you put a period of meditation as part of your curriculum?
Yeah.
But meditation is not easy. Understanding life in itself is not easy. Death is something, how do you explain it to a young child who's just about starting out?
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about these aspects and what Ashtavakra talks about life, death, detachment, and centering yourself. And then we'll talk a little further on how we can make it more accessible, or we can explain it better to the youth.
Well, I'll give you one example since you mentioned life and how it's not easy to explain. Well, let me tell you, some of the stuff that they made me do in PT class was also not easy. Climbing up some random whatever, it was not easy. Certainly not easy for me as a Bengali boy who loved his rice and ratagulla, right? I mean, but be that as it may, look, obviously Ashtavakra Gita is part of the great, universe of Advaita Vedanta, right? And the lessons are quite clear. What is life? Life is to discover that what you see around you through your senses is an illusion. Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya. The Brahman is the truth and the world is an illusion, right? Of course, Ashtavakra Gita carries forward that tradition. What is death? Death is nothing. Death is just changing clothes, right?
And it's the spirit that
it is the soul that matters, right? Death is nothing. The body is nothing. The body will collapse. The body will suffer. The body will go through all of this.
But the Atman will carry on.
And if you are able to reach enlightenment, you will be able to see. They're saying as they say, the seer and the seen, right? You will be able to look at your own body and everything that you're doing with some distance, right? So you are not the person who's doing the things. You are the real you. Is that which is watching you do these things, right? The inner you, so to speak, right? And therefore, death. I mean, and I have again come more and more to this thing that we should celebrate death. if the life that has been led has been happy. Right? We of course mourn the passing of the physical body, but in fact the truth is the person we love never goes away from us, because that person is not the body. We recognize that soul through this physical form, but if you genuinely have a soul to soul connect, that influence never goes away from you. Ironically, the book I think in popular culture that best explains it, ironically, is Harry Potter, where J.K. Rowling explains Harry Potter, why he didn't die because of love of his mother. Right? And these are all, ancient Indian ideas.
Of course.
Right? So whether your mother is alive or dead, the physical form, the love of your mother protects you. Right? And if we have the ability to realize that, then we realize that the person is always with us in that sense. Right? Therefore, I think all of these ideas should be ingrained from a very early age. Even if they don't understand entirely, even if kids don't understand entirely. Listen, when my parents started taking me to the Ramakrishna mission, and when I, as a toddler, began going to the ISKCON temple next door, I never understood anything. I just loved the fact that they were singing, and then I would get some mithai and whatever, right? But something goes in. Something goes in that brings you back many years later.
I think that was the thing that happened with me as well. My parents used to do their sandhyas every day.
Yes.
And initially I had hundreds of questions and complaints about them doing this, calling the Panditji once in a while for this puja or that. But I think when, and I'll also come to that because you also mentioned the same thing, especially after my loss, when I lost my dad, is when I actually found my way back into that spiritual self.
Sure.
And realized that it was such a big service they did to me and my brother to be practicing their dharma every day.
Correct.
You also mentioned something about this. That you also mentioned something about your dad's illness.
Yeah.
And that's when you understood the Ashtavakra Gita in its true sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw my father's, who has always been a tremendously active person with great, tremendous energy, never failing to, never any dimming of the energy, ever a great ability to work very hard. When I saw his body crumble, in a sense, when I saw him coming face to face, in a sense, with death, I realized that, the futility of many things. And I realized that all the things that really matters, we have never paid attention. See, in that moment, all our achievements, all our other things, none of it matters. What matters is, for the lack of a better word, your inner strength. But that inner strength doesn't come from, it's not an injection that you can take. That inner strength is something you build through deep understanding of the nature of life, right? And that can't happen in one day. Sometimes it happens with a jhatka, like you're saying, like with this one push, then you're in such pain and such, agony and such sorrow that it's sort of, a window opens inside you, right? I mean, when I saw my father extremely ill and, with a terrible stroke, with a fracture in his neck and so on and so forth, I realized that, how little time, in a sense, I had spent in really trying to wonder what are the things that are most important to me. And many of the things that I thought were most important to me were perhaps not that important after all. Right? So it's definitely a moment of clarity. It's like that. It's like that Leonard Cohen song, right? There's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. The light gets in when we have a crack in our facade, right? Because after all, we are all, as normal human beings, we are all leading a life of pretense. There's always a facade. There's always a projection. That projection, that facade needs to crack for the light to get in. But if from a very young childhood you're given a sort of education an understanding, an introduction to deeper truths. I think that really helps you, grow up to be very centered. To go back to that phrase which I really like, or the word that I really like, it makes you a really centered person. Monks often tell me, it's not like monks don't get angry.
Of course, yeah.
They just react to anger differently than you and me.
we do. Yeah.
Right? It's not like monks don't get frustrated. They react to frustration in a different manner than we do. And all of this has been, now neurologically proved. They've done mapping of monks who have meditated for a long, long time. Thousands of hours, right? Literally their brain waves work in a different manner than yours and mine.
Of course.
So, all of this is now proved, and the benefits of all of this is proved. We would be foolish not to embrace it, especially for our children. Whatever's happened to us has happened, but especially for a younger generation at a school and college level, especially considering the kind of toxicity that's going on in our schools and colleges, it's really time.
But I think, at this point, some people might also question, which is a counter question to what, Ashtavakra proposes, and what you're saying is to find a purpose of your life, bring clarity of thought. But if you're finding a purpose, bringing clarity of thought, it in a way also counters the fact that you're again moving towards attachment while you have to actually move away.
No, it's actually exactly the reverse. That clarity shows you the futility of it all. The clarity doesn't show you purpose of ambition that, okay, I am vice president, I'll become CEO. That clarity shows that this is meaningless. All this chair and office and designation, all of this will go. Tomorrow you might step out of your office, one car accident, you'll be gone. That all of this is so temporary. All of this is so temporal. There is a transcendental truth and reality, which is the only truth. And that is the clarity. The clarity is not of purpose like we usually think of purpose. That I have a clear purpose. What is the purpose? I want to become CEO of such and such company. No. The clarity and purpose is to realize that sure, you may do some work and make money also, and all of this is fine. But all of this is really temporary. Finally, if you think this is the path that will bring you happiness, it never will, it never can. It is impossible. Right? You may be the CEO, you may be the strongest person in the world, you may be prime minister, whatever you are, you may be president. In your moment of great weakness, when you face a loss and so on and so forth, you will realize none of this means anything.
But then it brings me back to the same question. Is there a stage at which you should start really thinking about these things and probably bringing them into practice? Because up until a certain stage, you have to be, you have to be competitive, you have to achieve what you have, the goals that you have set. It's our own Sanatan, Paddhati, which asks us to be in the Grahastha ashram and, then move towards Vanaprastha. And more often than not, this Vanaprastha is when you actually start talking about detachment and...
I think of it a little differently. I think what was suggested to us is that you are born, right? Since you're born in a particular context, you were born in the family you were born in, I was born in the family I was born in, we have to fulfill certain familial obligations.
Right.
Or rather, obligations of the world. We should do that obligation with detachment. This is even, more tougher to do. It's not that tomorrow if you have children, nobody's saying be detached and don't feed your child. Nobody's saying tomorrow if you're married, neglect your spouse and be detached. What they're saying is do it all to the best of your ability, knowing that this is all limited and futile and they will never give you the final freedom. So in a sense, I would argue people are probably able to do even greater or better work in that sense because they have a certain detachment. Let me explain how. If I write a book and my mind is always focused on how many book copies will it sell, Will it get an award or not? It traps me into a framework. But imagine if I were to just write a book for the pure pleasure of it, that's surging out of me, that content. And I don't care about anything else. I detach myself from it's like the great lesson of the Bhagavad Gita, right? That the results you are not concerned with. You are only concerned with the fact that you have to do your duty. And that's the detachment Ashtavakra is also talking about, right? You do your duty. You're in a context, Raja Janak is Raja. But Raja Janak is also a seer. See, the other thing about Ashtavakra Gita is, unlike the Bhagavad Gita, this is not a Guru-Shishya conversation. Because Raja Janak himself is enlightened too.
True.
So it's almost, if not exactly, almost a conversation between peers. Right? So Raja Janak is Raja. And yet, he realizes that the framework is futile at a particular level. Right? As Krishna tells Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, you are here to fight.
Correct.
The universe has brought you in a moment where you have to fulfill your duty. Your duty is to fight this righteous war. Right? And it's like that question that is asked of Krishna, that you could have stopped all of this. Countless people have died, entire generations have been wiped out.
Correct.
This is why Krishna is cursed at the end, if you remember.
True.
At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, at the end of the Mahabharata, at the end of the Mahabharata, Krishna is cursed that your many generations will suffer, the Yadavas will suffer, because you could have saved all these people.
True.
And Krishna says, sure, maybe this is the moment, and I take your curse, and yet I couldn't have stopped it. The wheel turns the way it turns.
Correct.
And it was not my job to stop it. Because this was what life was unfolding. Right? And yet it was my job to steer it in a particular direction, if I could. And to help the righteous. That's why yada yada hi dharmasya. Right? In every age I will come to protect the righteous.
Right.
But I cannot stop the war. The war will still happen.
Of course.
Right? I can be a sarathi to the righteous and protect them. But the war is still the war. The war is the collected karma of that universe, right?
Correct.
The collected karma of the Pandavas, the Kauravas, all of those people involved in the Great War. It's their karma, you cannot stop it. Yes, I will protect the righteous. And if you surrender to me as Draupadi did, I will always protect you. Right? So, I think we tend to think of these lessons as just lessons in books. But I think they have I at least have felt in my life, they have deep resonances in our everyday life.
Of course.
I find myself doing better work if I stop worrying, what will it bring? You do it and you put it out, and then you're like, okay, beyond a point, it is what it is, right? And all things that we do, so to speak, every action has a determined result, so to speak, which is not in our hand. We can only make the effort, which I think is an extremely liberating idea.
Absolutely.
Because most of us are clutching at straws, to be honest, It has no meaning. And because we keep clinging on to these straws, we become more desperate and more anxious and more fearful, and thus more angry and more agitated and more violent. It's a trap. It's truly a trap. That doesn't mean all of us, just because we understand this, have exited the trap. No, not at all. But at least we have the realization that this is a trap.
So what, according to you, does Ashtavakra say about ego?
I think Ashtavakra says ego is really an illusion. It is the rope and the snake. You hold on to it because you think it's the snake, as it were. And it only makes you more and more frightened and fearful. If you only had the ability to see that it's a mere piece of rope, you would throw it away.
What does he say about moksha?
Liberation can only be attained if you realize in this very moment that everything that you're so concerned about, including your fear and anxiety, is truly an illusion. You can give it all up and become free. One of the things that Ashtavakra says again and again is, what are you so worried about? What are you so trapped in? What are you so attached to? Give it all up, become free, become happy.
How do you view this resurgence of, ancient philosophical teachings that is happening currently in India, especially in terms of not limiting to Ramayana and Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. Now it's moved to Vedas and Upanishads and our ancient scriptures, Yoga Sutras and all.
I think this is very welcome, and much more needs to be done. I think we are still at the tip of the iceberg. I think Indian society needs to go through a complete transformation in getting to understand its core philosophies and also building a society based on the core philosophies. There's no point in understanding the core philosophies and then go out and doing the worst kind of behavior and crime and so on and so forth. That hypocrisy does nobody any good. I think we really should come to a point where we should be able to apply, applied spirituality. I'm a big believer in applied spirituality. How do I know that Lipika is pious? By Lipika's behavior, not because she tells me every day she's pious. So applied spirituality is very important for us.
Interesting. What is the message you think the readers will get from the book, your and Dr. Vivek Debrow's book on Ashtavakra?
I think they will, find an absolutely enriching new translation of the Ashtavakra Gita that Vivek Da has done. And of course, they will understand, in our reflections on the Ashtavakra Gita, on how many of these principles might apply to their everyday life. Because I'm of the belief that it's all very well to talk about great philosophies, but if they don't change my imperfect life today, then that has very little meaning for me. It must impact my everyday imperfect life today, and I think we have made it a real effort to try and explain how it might impact and better your everyday life today.
Let's also talk about how the world is changing these days. We are at the brink of a war. People call it the World War. I view it personally from my limited understanding of how things are going. A civilizational war again, because if you look at it, it's not just an Israel-Palestine war, but a war of two civilizations and faiths there as well. Similarly, in Russia and Ukraine, I think it is a similar kind of civilizational war between the faith and beliefs of the ancient land of what we call Russia today, and Ukraine, which is led by somebody who falls in the same line of, say, Kamala Harris and maybe our own very own Mr. Gandhi. But tell me something, how important is it? And we also see that there is a growing conversation around the Kshatriya aspect of Hindus. When we talk about faith, then in the Hindu faith, up until now, we were told that, we are the faith that accepts and allows all kinds of faiths to, grow. But today we are also talking about the Shakt aspect, the Kshatriya aspect. How do you view that?
No, I think he had a completely wrong understanding of our civilization. Hindu civilization does not say that, come please kill me, I will accept everything that you give. That's ridiculous. Hindu civilization says everyone is welcome as long as they are dharmic and follow dharma. If you are adharmic and you attack me, then obviously I will defend myself. It is my duty to defend myself. In fact, in 40 years of knowing the Ramakrishna Mission, I was surprised the other day to see for the first time a video by a senior Ramakrishna Mission monk talking about the importance of Shakti and talking about the fact that this idea of absolutist non-violence is ridiculous. It's not, this is not a philosophy at all. This is, in fact, I would say this is a misreading even of Gandhi. Even the people who say this in the context of Gandhian belief are misreading Gandhi.
Okay.
So this was never in our society. This is a purposely, malicious propaganda that has been done against against us.
Mm.
If we are attacked, we have to protect.
Mm.
Please remember, we are a goddess worshipping civilization.
Mm.
And remember, the goddess has 9, roops, as it were, right? There is also Ma Kalaratri, there is also Ma Kali in it, who dances with the, with a necklace of skulls, right? So when when Mahishasur comes, you cannot be non-violent. When Shumbha Nishumba comes, you cannot be non-violent. When you are faced with enemies where if you cut them off, every drop of their blood brings about another range of enemies, you have to fight. And if you're fighting Rakta Bij, you cannot say, I'm going to be non-violent in front of Rakta Bij. In front of Rakta Bij, you will have to do what you have to do. But, having said that, for everyone who is dharmic and comes in peace, the doors of India, long before, and I say this in many speeches, long before the Statue of Liberty said that America's doors are open for all dispossessed around the world, India said, including to the Parsis, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, all the world is my family, and wherever you are troubled, come to my doors. I will give you shelter. Right? But not to the adharmics.
Let's get to one of your books that you wrote a couple of years ago called The Sacred Sword.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about how different is the kind of what his understanding. He was a Shakti Puja. He was a Shakti Upasak. He was a Devi Upasak. How far has the Sikh understanding of Guru Gobind Singh's teachings come from what he had propagated to what we understand it in the modern day world, especially in terms of the Khalistani movement?
No, the Khalistanis are, they are completely, this is all propaganda, right? And this is all based on ISI money and so on and so forth. Please understand, if you look at the maps that these so-called Khalistanis show, they include all kinds of things, Himachal Pradesh and even Gujarat and so on and so forth. But they don't have Lahore, which was the heart, which was the capital of the Sikh Empire. Right? So already we know that this is all vicious propaganda. See, at the end of the day, Sikhism came out essentially partly in terms of providing the Khalsa was a warrior, in a tribe in our society, and partly in a sense to bridge the divisions. If you look at Nanak and Guru Nanak and so on and so forth, the divisions between various parts of the society, including between castes, including between Hindus and Muslims, and so on and so forth, right? At that time, we're obviously talking about the Mughal era at this time, right? So it emerged to sort of bridge these gaps, and fundamentally Khalsa was particularly created essentially to fight back against Mughal oppression.
Correct.
At the end of the day, Guru Gobind Singh and his warriors, Guru Gobind Singh famously said, Chidiyo se main baaj ladao, with sparrows I will fight the eagle, right? Gidro ko main sher banao, with the jackals I will turn them into lions. Saba lakh se ek ladao, tab Gobind Singh naam kehlao. Only then you can call me Singh, right? What is Singh? It's like the lion, right? They took the title of Singh because they had this belief of immortal strength where one Sikh would take on a 1,25,000 of their enemies and fight back, right? That was their vision. And like you said, Chandi Diwar, famously Guru Gobind Singh wrote to Ma Chandi, so to speak, right? And this is across the board. In Chennai, where I recently went, there is the great Kali Kambal temple. I saw that, and very few people even in Chennai know this. But I realized when I went to that ancient temple that Shivaji Maharaj had brought his sword to worship before the goddess before going into battle. Right? So, it's incredible. These stories are really, really incredible.
But from the political point of view, how do you see over the centuries,
the understanding of Sikhs and their identities have
Yeah.
kind of slightly
Yeah.
diluted with their connect with the Hindu or the
No,
Sanatan.
this has been purposely done.
Hmm.
This is maliciously done.
Hmm.
This has for many years has been maliciously done to break Hindus and Sikhs.
Hmm.
And actually, if you look at it, at the heart of it, there is an Englishman.
Hmm.
You know, you go and read about this, that the Sikhs and Hindus were always this. You know, they used to say that every Hindu family sends their eldest son to become a Sikh.
True.
Right?
True.
But there was this Englishman who came and did ethnographic study
Hmm.
and came up with this great text, and all the British, learned all this from them, saying that no, the Hindus and the Sikhs have nothing to do with it. The Sikhs are entirely separate, and put this thing into our society that it's separate, and the British propagated no, it's separate. It's all different. This is the martial race, it's absolutely separate.
Something like the Aryan invasion theory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Often you will see, if you, and I'm going to say, in a lot of malice in India,
Hmm.
if you start digging,
Hmm.
somewhere you will find an Englishman,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I'm not sure, actually in the Renaissance period, there were a lot of Englishmen who also wanted to do good in India and so on and so forth. But the harm that the British Raj did in India is incalculable, and we are still suffering for it.
True.
We are really still suffering for it. One of the prime examples of driving this wedge between Hindus and Sikhs goes back to quote unquote ethnographic work done by an English scholar.
Hmm. Hmm.
So all of this is there. And of course, after that, after independence, Pakistan and all, has obviously fueled all of these things.
So the 84 riots were also something that you feel.
It's very tragic. Brindanwale, and this is no secret. The incumbent ruling party of India at that time decided to support the rise of Brindanwale to divide the Sikh vote. Of course, as the Americans have realized with their support to Islamists, if you take that genie out of the bottle, you cannot put it back in. So they took the genie out of the bottle, then the genie became a Rakshas. Now then, obviously, whatever
There's
happened.
also an accusation these days being, levied that the current regime, that is the BJP, and their Hindutva and the aggressive Hindutva stance that they take, has actually led to a greater divide and the resurrection of this Rakshasa called.
No, look, I doubt this very much.
Hmm.
I actually think this has especially been triggered after India pulled out Article 370. Pakistan got absolutely desperate and they realized that Kashmir to gaya. Look, I don't believe any government in the future can bring back Article 370.
Right.
That door is closed. It's done.
Hmm.
So I think the ISI in Pakistan and many other ill wishers of India and various other parts of the world got really desperate to trigger something else. See, what are the fault lines being triggered in India? Same old stuff. Khalistan, then there's Kashmir, of course, and Northeast, then via language, and via religious conversions in the South, right, in southern India, malicious activity there. This is all, throughout India's independent history, this is an old story. So I think then the Khalistanis were really triggered and they started. You'll see, after 2019, really this Khalistan thing really took off again.
True.
So the pulling out of Article 370 really gave them nightmares. That if India can do this, India, it's a different India we're facing. So, because a lot of people didn't even realize, I remember, I used to live in Oxford at that time, I was studying there. I remember people just didn't believe that India would be able to do this.
True.
This was outside the realm, unimaginable, outside the realm of imagination. So that made a lot of forces very, very desperate. So that's why this has been triggered. It's an old story.
So what does the sacred sword really talk about?
It talks about the life of Guru Gobind Singh. It begins with, this terrible thing of his father's, murder by the Mughals, in Delhi and so on and so forth. And I don't want to give away, all people should read the book, all the details. But it really talks about Guru Gobind Singh's life and what it meant, um, and really how the Khalsa came together, really to become a force against Mughal oppression, right? And I always say in my lectures about this book that it's that promise, right? Bole so nihal sat se akal. Wherever there will be danger and oppression, the sword of the Khalsa shall rise to fight it.
Right.
This was in a sense the promise of the Khalsa, that this will be a tribe of warriors trained in the most martial of arts, that if there is oppression that society faces, the sword of Khalsa shall resist, right? That's why you see in the Khalsa, the swords of Khalsa, right? And that has been politicized. But please remember, even today, some of India's best known and at the highest level in the Indian armed forces are Sikhs,
True.
right? They are impeccable military men of the highest quality and standard, and many of them are Sikhs,
Absolutely.
right? So, I think these Khalistanis are a bunch of jokers, essentially. And they are doing what they're doing. It's very nefarious. Now what has happened is all this Khalistan business, Deepika has got tied into the drug trade and the narcotics trade in Punjab.
True.
Then, because it's got into the narcotics trade, that's why it has got connected to all these gangland things, all these whatever, Goldie Brar and then Sidhu Moosewala and whatever. It has become a very dirty business. It's not just, a bunch of people being violent. And please remember, people forget, including Canadians, before 9/11, the worst ever airborne terror attack in the world was the bombing of Air India 182, the Kanishka flight, which was bombed in 1985 by Khalistanis, by Talvinder Singh Parmar. Please remember the history, Lipika. Talvinder Singh Parmar, Indira Gandhi asked Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, to extradite Talvinder Singh Parmar, saying that he's a terrorist, he's up to no good. The same man 3 years later went and executed the bombing of the flight. So again, in Canada also, the Trudeau family has a history of being malicious towards India. Pierre Trudeau was exactly like this, now Justin Trudeau is like this, right? So, the only good thing about all of this is that India is much stronger than we used to be. It used to be very easy to trigger trouble in India.
And bully it.
Look, even after when CA announcement happened, there was every effort to create a riot in India. In Delhi, they almost succeeded, right? Every effort was made to create a riot in India. It's just that India is much stronger. We have far more, ability that we have been able to stop it. Otherwise, this is tricky.
So at this point, let's talk about the Vivekananda's Bharat.
Sure.
And your book, your
Yeah.
biography of him.
Yes.
If we had to tell the audience of why one should read Vivekananda,
Yeah.
and what are the aspects so let's start with this. Which book of Vivekananda would you recommend for people to pick? His own works.
Well, look, if you're a serious reader of Vivekananda, I would recommend that you go to the original. There are 9 volumes that the Ramakrishna Mission produces of his collected works. Please pick it up and read it. Of course, you could read my book, The Modern Monk. Apart from my book, there's also a very good reader of Swami Vivekananda's works, which Makarand Parajite wrote and put together. You could read that also. So there are some very good. In Bengali, of course, Shankar wrote this beautiful book on Swami Vivekananda. That's another great book. So there are lots of books about him. Vivekananda is an immortal figure. Look, he's really in many ways, he and Sri Aurobindo, and he even more than Aurobindo, is really the father of modern Indian nationalism. And Aurobindo, of course, said that in jail he had visitations, as it were. He dreamt of Vivekananda and he got instructions from him and so on and so forth. So, Vivekananda is a seminal figure. We cannot talk about the modern Indian nation without talking about Vivekananda. That's impossible.
And where did we lose
following his ideology?
I mean, because again, we convert everything into posters and calendars and so on and so forth. Arise, awake, I mean, but it doesn't mean anything. I mean, again, I go back to my point of applied spirituality. It's not enough to say, oh, arise, awake. You must apply that in your life and truly arise and awake, right?
So, if today the youth needs to be told about the teachings of Vivekananda, what are the few things that you would like to share about?
One is very clear. Vivekananda believed that there can be no spirituality and no defense of the nation without strength. If you are physically and mentally weak, you are of no good to yourself or to society. So physical strength, mental strength is very, very important, right? Physical strength will come from, obviously physical activity, and mental strength, as we have discussed in this conversation, will come from meditative activities. Unless we build a nation of people who have this strength, the nation cannot be protected.
Right.
And the second thing, Vivekananda's great lesson, of course, is that at the end of the day, there is something beautiful and precious about India. And there is a Sanatan Dharma, there is a Sanatan culture. Vivekananda, remember, I often say in my lectures, Vivekananda is the confidence of the colonized. Even though he was a resident and a citizen of a colonized country, he had the confidence to go to America and say that you are giving us quote unquote modernity, but we have something even more precious to give you, which is our ancient Rishi culture, which is our Sanatan Dharma, which is our great spiritual culture.
So which means he becomes even more relevant in
Yes,
these times.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about the man who saved India.
Yes.
So
Sardar
Sardar Patel
We're going to celebrate, I might be doing one more book on him.
Wow.
See, Sardar Patel, again, Sardar Patel is a seminal figure. The very map of India wouldn't have existed without Sardar Patel.
Of course.
I have no doubts in my mind. We would have probably not been able to retain Hyderabad, Kashmir would become a question mark, Junagadh, all kinds of problems. Including in Rajputana, there would be a problem.
True.
Right? So Sardar Patel really protected and defended and built the very modern map of India. Cartographic. He's really the cartographic architect of modern India. Right? Sadly, we didn't value him and perhaps still don't value him enough. Also, Sardar Patel, and that's the theme of my new book on him. Sardar Patel represents a particular strain of pragmatism, pragmatic philosophy in India. In India, we think of our national movement only through romantics, the romantic sort of philosophy line, right? Gandhi and Nehru and so on and so forth. But Patel represented the real pragmatism, right? Even Subhash Chandra Bose was a bit of a romantic, went to raise an army and so on and so forth. Patel, in fact, was far more pragmatic. He followed Gandhi, but, Gandhi with, speaking softly and carrying a big stick, so to speak. Right? His Gandhian philosophy was speaking like Gandhi but carrying a big stick. Right? And I think that was very, very. I wish Sardar Patel had lived for another 10 years. I have no doubt India would have been very different had Patel lived till 1960. He died in 1950. And remember, Patel wrote 2 letters to Pandit Nehru before he died. And he explains in those letters very clearly that one of India's great threats will come from China. And that we shouldn't have taken the Kashmir issue to the UN. All the things he predicted came true. All the things he predicted came true. All the fears he had about India came true. We lost a war with China, Kashmir became a problem. It all came true. So Patel represents he was a great philosopher of the pragmatic, and I think he hasn't been analyzed in that manner.
Well, before I let you go, one last question.
Sure.
You're a Bengali.
Yes.
And one thing that
I'm a Probashi Bengali.
Yeah.
Since I've lived away. The Bengalis are the only people, Lipika, who think about it. The South Indians don't have non-South Indian.
Right.
The West Indians don't have non-West Indians.
Right.
Only the Bengalis have non-Bengali.
Just because they
As a criteria, as a category. No, Gujaratis never say we are Gujaratis and they're non-Gujaratis. No. only the Bengalis say we are Bengalis, and then these are all non-Bengalis.
Okay.
So it's quite funny, but I've lived, like I'm a Provashi Bengali. I've lived outside Bengal now for 25 years.
The question that troubles me is
Yes.
that Bengal produced some of the biggest and brightest nationalist minds
Yeah.
in Bharat.
Yeah.
Then what went wrong?
34 years of communism.
But how? I mean, how can people allow, even that's been also like it's been about 15 years since, 15,
Yeah.
20 years since the communist rule.
See, what happened in Bengal, Lipika, is that generations of the top minds of Bengal left. See, if you empty, it's a bit like brain drain, right? If you take the best people out of a society over a 30-40 year period, that society will be rotten only. There's nothing you can do. 30-40 years, the best people, young people of Bengal have left. So then the politics is, nefarious. It's the same thing we used to say about Bihar, right? I mean, if all the good people are gone, then the people in power will be gundas only, because they are the only people who are left, right? So Bengal actually really needs, Bengal still has a lot of potential. Bengal really needs a complete reinvention of its cultural self and an assertion of the cultural roots of Bengal, which is the Sanatan roots of Bengal, the Shakta roots of Bengal, right? See, Bengal leaned towards communism because, for a good reason, I think, because because Bengal got so much education to begin with, women's emancipation, all of that. They wanted a better world, a more egalitarian world. But the path that they chose for that egalitarian world was highly, highly toxic, right? They could have said, we will follow the path of, Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda and Aurobindo and make a more egalitarian society. Swami Vivekananda said, feed Daridra Narayan, see Narayan in the, every poor, right? And feed them and, clothe them and make them strong and so on and so forth. They could have chosen that path to, and that would have also kept our industry. See, the other thing that happened was all the wealth went, right? So all the wealth went out of the hands of the Bengalis. All the great companies got shut down because of all this nonsense. In fact, Bengal was a great, as one of the great business centers of India for a long time, even much before Bombay and Delhi. Because of course it has a port and the great jute trade and this, that and the other. In fact, in one of my books I mentioned Dwarkanath Tagore, relative of Rabindranath Tagore, Prince Dwarkanath Tagore, so to speak. I mean, he was a pioneering, entrepreneurial figure of he was one of lots of things. The first, private sector bank with partners, iron and steel, jute, shipping, no business that he was not part of. So he really wanted to bring the industrial revolution to the banks of the Hooghly, right? But from there, look at where Bengal is today.
Right.
So Bengal has to re-look at its own culture and rediscover that entrepreneurial energy and culturally that energy of Shakta energy, so to speak, and give up the rubbish that exists, in many parts.
But according to them, they have chosen the Shakta energy in Mamata Banerjee. How does she always tend to get away? I mean, even with this recent crime that happened against that baby doctor, she still seems to have been getting away with it.
Society has become really vitiated very sadly in Bengal, and I feel very sad, after all, that is our great homeland and that is where our culture comes from and so on and so forth. I feel very passionately about Bengal and very passionately about Kolkata, and I hope I'm able to do something for it one day. Certainly there is much more that can be done, and one of the big things that has to happen is a huge resurgence of Hinduism in Bengal. That's very important. And a huge resurgence of entrepreneurial activity among Bengalis. These are two things. Wealth and strength have to go hand in hand.
Right.
And we really need to push this. We're trying, all of us are trying in small ways, but this has to be a revolution, We need to really drive, Bengal would be a great place for an entrepreneurial hub. You know, it has education, most people are educated, English speaking, you know, all of those things are there. It would be great to create an entrepreneurial hub in Bengal. But, I mean, as you correctly point out, there are many, many problems. I do hope in my lifetime at least that Bengal will turn the page. And, you know, if I can do something for it, that'll be wonderful. Of course, I hope to save it from the certain hysterical Rajya Sabha MPs that, you know, sully its name. Just amazing. Anyway.
But on
that
that
note,
on that note, Hindol, thank you so much for making time.
Thank you,
for us.
Lipika. Thank you for calling me. This was a wonderful conversation. You and I had not met for some time.
Yes, I'm so glad that this happened
Thank
today, and I could talk to you about everything that you've written so far, except a few things on entrepreneurship, for which we'll probably do another one sometime. But all the very best.
Thank you
for your future projects and the books that you're writing.
It's very kind of you.
And I look forward to seeing you very soon again to talk about more things that we.
And more power to you and more power to the Indic pen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. If you want to continue listening in to such interesting conversations about Bharat, do like and subscribe.